Life flows best when you don't force it. Most of us have been taught exactly the opposite, haven't we? We've been told that success comes from pushing, from grinding, from making things happen through sheer willpower. No pain, no gain. The early bird catches the worm. All of that. You know, there's something absolutely fascinating about watching water move down a mountain. It doesn't struggle. It doesn't clench itself up and push against the rocks with tremendous effort. It simply finds the easiest way, always flowing according to its nature. And yet here we are, and what do? We fight, we push, we force our way through existence as if we were trying to swim up Niagara Falls. Well, I want to share something with you today that might just change everything about how you move through this beautiful, mysterious dance we call life. There is a principle in Chinese philosophy called Wu Wei. Wu means none, or not. It's a negation. Wei has a combination of meanings. It can mean action, making, doing. But the best translation I have found for it is forcing. And so Wu Wei is the principle of not forcing in anything that you do. Now we know when we watch any performance of an artist, be it a dancer or an actor or a musician, we know immediately when the performance is forced. And we say it doesn't ring true. It's too artificial. It doesn't seem to be natural. Many people who study the Taoist doctrines think that Wu Wei means do nothing in the sense of laissez-faire, be lazy, always be passive. It doesn't mean that. There is a time for action. When you study judo, you use muscle only at the right moment. When your opponent is hopelessly overextended and off balance, and you add a little muscle to it, and you throw him across the room. But only then. You never use muscle at the wrong moment. For as Shakespeare knew perfectly well, there is a tide in the affairs of men which, taken at its flood, leads on to fortune. And so Wu Wei is based on knowledge of the tide, the drift of things. Get with it. Wu Wei is the art of sailing rather than the art of rowing. You see, most of us don't understand this. We've been brought up to believe that everything worthwhile requires tremendous effort, that we must make things happen through sheer willpower. But this is like trying to make a flower bloom by pulling on its petals. There's a way of moving with life rather than against it. A way of acting that feels effortless because it's in harmony with the natural flow of things. One of the most amusing things about being human is our deep-seated belief that we're running the show. Oh, we don't usually say it quite so boldly, but watch how we behave, and you'll see this charming illusion everywhere. We make our plans, we set our goals with military precision, we organize our lives down to the last detail, and then we become absolutely flummoxed when reality has the audacity to unfold differently than we expected. It's rather like being surprised that the weather doesn't consult our calendar before deciding to rain. When we try to control outcomes, when we force things, we create what I call the squeeze. You know what I mean by the squeeze? It's that feeling when you're gripping something so tightly that your knuckles turn white. The harder you squeeze, the more likely it is to slip through your fingers. Think about trying to fall asleep when you can't sleep. The more you try to force yourself to sleep, the more awake you become, or trying to remember a word that's on the tip of your tongue. The harder you strain for it, the more elusive it becomes. But the moment you relax, the moment you stop forcing, there it is. This is the fundamental paradox of control. The more we try to control something, the more it seems to slip away from us. And why is this? Because control, as we usually understand it, is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what we actually are. We imagine that we are separate from the world around us, that we are independent agents acting upon a passive environment. But this is like imagining that a wave is separate from the ocean, or that a flame is separate from the fire. We are not separate from this world. We are expressions of it. We are the world doing its thing in this particular time and place, in this particular form. When I try to force outcomes, I'm essentially fighting against myself. It's like my left hand wrestling with my right hand. A lot of energy gets expended. A lot of drama unfolds, but nothing really gets accomplished except exhaustion. I remember an old story about a farmer whose horse ran away. His neighbors came to console him. Oh, what terrible luck. But the farmer simply replied, maybe so, maybe not. A few days later, the horse returned, bringing with it a herd of wild horses. The neighbors exclaimed, what wonderful luck. Again, the farmer said, maybe so, maybe not. His son tried to tame one of the wild horses and broke his leg. What terrible luck, said the neighbors. Maybe so, maybe not. replied the farmer. Then war came to the land, and all the young men were drafted, except the farmer's son, whose broken leg exempted him from service. What wonderful luck, the neighbors cried, and the farmer, maybe so, maybe not. The farmer understood something profound. He understood that what appears to be good fortune or bad fortune is often simply life unfolding according to patterns, too complex for our limited perspective to fully grasp. He wasn't trying to control the story. He was simply present with whatever arose, ready to respond appropriately to each new situation as it unfolded. If you really want to understand Wu Wei, this art of not forcing, all you have to do is step outside and observe nature. Nature is the ultimate teacher of effortless action. Look at how a river moves. Does it ever struggle against the landscape? Does it ever say, no, I refuse to go around that mountain. I'm going to go straight through it? Of course not. Water is perhaps the most humble substance on earth, always seeking the lowest place, always yielding to obstacles, always finding the easiest path. And yet, over time, what happens? The weak water carves through the strong rock. The Grand Canyon wasn't created by force. It was created by persistence, by gentle but constant flow over millions of years. Water teaches us that yielding is not the same as being weak. Yielding is intelligent. It's strategic. It's the wisdom of knowing when to bend so that you don't break. And consider how trees grow. Have you ever seen a tree straining and struggling to get taller? Have you ever heard a tree grunting with effort as it pushes its branches toward the sun? Of course not. Trees grow naturally, effortlessly, according to their inner nature and in response to their environment. They don't force their growth. They simply allow it. But trees are incredibly strong. They can withstand storms that would topple any rigid structure. And how do they do this? By bending, by yielding to the wind, rather than fighting it. The tree that refuses to bend is the tree that breaks. Or watch a cat. Have you ever seen a cat force anything? When a cat wants to go through a small opening, it doesn't bash its head against the gap repeatedly. It carefully assesses the situation, perhaps tests the opening with a paw, and then flows through with liquid grace. When a cat hunts, it doesn't chase its prey in frantic desperation. It waits, it watches, it positions itself perfectly, and then it acts with lightning precision at exactly the right moment. Cats understand timing. They understand the difference between waiting and hesitating, between patience and procrastination. But perhaps the most beautiful example of Wu Wei in nature is the way the seasons change. Spring doesn't force its way past winter. It doesn't push and strain and demand that the snow melt immediately. Instead, spring arrives gradually, gently, warming the earth degree by degree, coaxing the buds from their sleep, inviting the flowers to bloom. And when summer's time is done, it doesn't cling desperately to its warmth. It gracefully yields to autumn, which in turn yields to winter, which yields again to spring. There's a rhythm here, a natural timing that operates according to principles far deeper than our personal preferences or schedules. When we align ourselves with this rhythm, when we learn to sense the seasons in our own lives, we discover that things tend to unfold much more smoothly than when we try to force results according to our own arbitrary timelines. Let me share with you what effortless action actually feels like. Because Wu Wei isn't just a philosophical concept. It's a lived experience, a way of being that you can taste and touch right now. Think about walking. When you walk, do you consciously control every muscle in your legs? Do you think, now I must contract this muscle, now I must shift my weight, now I must lift this foot? Of course not. Walking is effortless because you've learned to trust your body's wisdom. You simply have the intention to walk, and your body takes care of all the complex coordination required. This is Wu Wei on a physical level. You're acting, but you're not forcing. You're accomplishing something. Getting from here to there, but you're not struggling against your own nature to do it. Or consider speaking. Right now, as I'm sharing these thoughts with you, I'm not forcing words to come. I'm not straining to construct each sentence. The words arise naturally from the flow of my thinking and feeling about these ideas. If I were to try to force the words to overthink each phrase, the flow would become stilted and unnatural. Wu Wei, in daily life, is about finding this same naturalness in everything we do. It's about learning to act from our center, from our authentic nature, rather than from our neuroses and compulsions. But here's the key, and this is where many people misunderstand. Wu Wei doesn't mean being lazy or passive. It doesn't mean waiting around for things to happen to you. It means being exquisitely responsive to life as it unfolds. It means developing the sensitivity to know when to act and when to wait, when to speak and when to listen, when to hold on and when to let go. Think of a jazz musician improvising. They're not following a rigid script, but they're not just making random noise either. They're responding to the music as it emerges, building on what came before, sensing where the music wants to go next. They're simultaneously creating and discovering, acting and receiving. This is the dance of Wu Wei. We act, but we act in harmony with larger patterns and rhythms that we don't fully control. We contribute our unique note to the symphony, but we don't try to drown out all the other instruments. I remember watching a master calligrapher at work once. His brush moved across the paper with such fluidity, such grace, that it seemed as though the characters were painting themselves. When I asked him about his technique, he smiled and said, "I don't paint the characters. I simply follow the brush, and the brush follows the ink, and the ink follows the paper, and the paper follows the words that want to be written." At first, this sounded like mystical nonsense to me, but as I watched him work, I began to see what he meant. He had practiced so thoroughly, had developed such sensitivity to his tools and materials, that he could respond to the subtlest variations in texture, pressure, and flow. He wasn't forcing the brush to create beautiful characters. He was collaborating with all the elements involved to allow beauty to emerge naturally. This is what mastery looks like in any field, whether it's art, sports, business, or relationships. Masters don't force results. They create conditions for excellence to arise naturally. They work hard, yes, but their effort is like the effort of a river flowing downhill, natural, inevitable, effective. When you're living in alignment with Wu Wei, effort feels different. It feels natural, sustainable, even enjoyable. You're still working, still striving, still growing, but you're doing so from a place of flow, rather than force, from ease rather than struggle. Here we come to one of the most beautiful paradoxes in all of philosophy. And life is absolutely full of these delicious paradoxes, isn't it? The paradox of not forcing is this. The moment you stop trying so hard to make something happen, it often begins to happen naturally. The moment you stop forcing, you often find yourself more powerful than you've ever been. But let's be very clear about what this means, because there's a tremendous difference between not forcing and simply giving up. There's a world of difference between Wu Wei and apathy. So one of the most famous sayings of Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching is superior virtue has no intention to be virtuous and thus is virtuous. Inferior virtue cannot let go of virtuosity and thus is not virtuous. So one could also say the real Wu Wei is not intentionally Wu Wei, and so is Wu Wei. But inferior Wu Wei so tries to be Wu Wei that it isn't. In other words, this is not a matter of cultivated passivity or even of cultivated spontaneity, because there are people who think that they are released, that they have realized that they are the Tao, as all of us in fact are. And they say, okay, baby, I'm that now, I'm going to have a ball. Well, what kind of a ball do they have? What they do is they look up the rules on which society runs and do the opposite. Well, that's still running by the rules of society. It's the mirror image in reverse. That's not spontaneity. You have to be able to realize that you don't know what you really want to do until you are very quiet and it tells you. Not forcing doesn't mean not caring. It doesn't mean becoming indifferent to outcomes or abandoning all your goals and dreams. Not forcing means caring so deeply, being so present and attentive that you can sense the natural timing and direction of things. It means caring enough to wait for the right moment rather than acting impulsively out of impatience or anxiety. Think about trying to thread a needle when you're in a hurry. The more you rush, the more your hands shake, the more the thread frays, the more frustrated you become, and the longer it takes to accomplish this simple task. But the moment you slow down, take a breath, steady your hands, and approach the task with calm attention, there, the thread slips through the eye effortlessly. This is the essence of not forcing. It's not about doing less. It's about doing better. It's not about lowering your standards. It's about raising your sensitivity. Or consider the art of persuasion. The person who tries to force their opinion on others, who argues aggressively, who refuses to listen, who pushes their agenda, regardless of the receptivity of their audience, how often do they actually change minds? Usually they just create resistance. But the person who listens deeply, who seeks first to understand, who plants seeds of possibility rather than trying to force immediate conversion, they often find that people come around to their point of view naturally, as if it were their own idea. This is why the most effective leaders often appear to be doing very little while accomplishing a great deal. They're not forcing their will upon their organizations. They're creating conditions where the best in people can emerge naturally. They're like gardeners rather than dictators. They prepare the soil, plant the seeds, provide water and light, and then trust the natural process of growth. When you stop forcing, when you align yourself with the natural flow of events, you often find that you have much more influence than when you were trying to control everything directly. It's like the difference between swimming against a strong current and swimming diagonally across it. When you fight the current head on, you exhaust yourself and make little progress. But when you work with the current's energy, while still maintaining your direction, you can reach your destination with much less effort. I'm reminded of the ancient story of the wind and the sun having a contest to see who could get a traveler to remove his coat. The wind blew harder and harder, but the more fiercely it blew, the more tightly the traveler wrapped his coat around himself. Then the sun simply shone warmly, and the traveler, feeling the pleasant warmth, naturally took off his coat of his own accord. The sun understood something the wind did not. Influence is more powerful than force, attraction more effective than coercion, and natural timing more efficient than imposed urgency. So here we are, at the end of our journey together. Though, of course, this isn't really an end at all. It's an invitation to begin, an invitation to experiment with this ancient wisdom in your own life. Let me leave you with a simple practice, something you can try right now, today, in whatever situation you find yourself. Look for one area of your life where you've been forcing things, where you've been pushing and striving and struggling without much to show for it. Maybe it's a relationship that's been strained, a work project that's been stalled, a personal goal that seems perpetually out of reach. Choose one area, just one, and for the next week, practice not forcing in that domain. This doesn't mean giving up or becoming passive. It means approaching the situation with curiosity instead of control, with patience instead of pressure, with flow instead of force. If it's a relationship, instead of trying to change the other person or force them to respond to you differently, focus on being genuinely present when you're with them. Listen more than you speak. Respond to what they're actually offering, rather than what you wish they were offering. If it's a work project, instead of grinding away at it with grim determination, step back and ask yourself, what wants to emerge here? What's the natural next step? How can I work with the materials and people involved rather than against their inherent nature? And as you experiment with not forcing, pay attention to what happens. Notice how your body feels when you're not fighting against life. Notice how your relationships shift when you're not trying to control them. Notice how opportunities begin to appear when you're not desperately grasping for them. You might be surprised to discover that the things you've been struggling to achieve begin to manifest more easily when you stop making them into such a big deal. You have to become again as a child to see this. Children know from the beginning that the world is weird, a strange thing, because everybody knows what it's all about, only they won't admit it. Being brought up is being taught not to admit it, as you know very well what's going on. But in order to find out once more as an adult, you have to become again as a child. So I'll leave you with this question. What happens when you stop pushing and simply flow? What wants to emerge in your life when you get your forceful, controlling, anxious self out of the way? The ancient Chinese character for Wu Wei suggests a person sitting quietly under a tree, completely present, completely at peace, completely available to whatever the moment might bring. Not lazy, not passive, but alert, responsive, ready. This is the invitation of Wu Wei, to become like that person under the tree, present, peaceful, available, trusting in the intelligence of life itself. Try it, see what happens. And remember, you don't have to force yourself to stop forcing. that would just be another kind of forcing, wouldn't it? Simply begin where you are. Notice where you're struggling. Breathe, soften, flow. Life is waiting to meet you there.